Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I am Tiffany with Voices for Independence, Fitness, and Activities. I am here to share another recipe with you as we continue our series on cooking across America. We are stopping in every state to recreate one of their classic favorites. Goodness, it's Friday. Thank goodness. Stumbling over my words already. This morning, we are going to be stopping in a place that is near and dear to my heart. Well, not really. I just grew up there. Mostly is Wisconsin. So I was actually born here in Erie, Pennsylvania, moved to Wisconsin when I was around 1, and we lived there until I was about 12. So a good portion of my youth was spent there, and I do remember this recipe fondly. We actually called it something a little different. What we're making today, I'll explain, and then I'll tell my little story. We're making what they call an almond kringle. So an almond kringle, it comes from Denmark. It was brought to the United States from bakers that settled in Racine, Wisconsin. And it is a Danish pastry that is traditionally shaped either in a ring or a pretzel type shape. So I do remember having these, although we call them kuchen, which I have found out from cooking across America. And when we stopped in North Dakota, one of our first stops, and we made kuchen. Kuchen is actually German for cake. This is more of a pastry, and the actual name is Kringle, so I'll have to correct all my siblings, because I'm sure they remember having this too. We used to have it on Sunday mornings when my dad would prepare brunch. He'd stop at the local grocery baker, and we'd pick up what we called a kuchen, but actually now I know is a Kringle. So we are going to recreate it now for you. Again, it's more of a pastry, but we are actually going to be baking it in a 13 by 9 inch pan. Again, traditionally in Denmark, it was the pretzel-shaped pastry or sometimes in a ring, but we are going to make it in a pan for convenience. So you'll want to start with a half a cup of butter, and then we're going to get a cup of flour, and we are going to either use a fork or a pastry cutter, if you have one, to blend these two ingredients together. We kind of wanted to blend it until the butter and flour are into fine crumbs. So you can use a fork, works great. This is called a pastry blender. It's a little kitchen utensil, but it comes in handy when you're making breads and doughs to really chop up your butter well and get it blended with your flour. You'll want to use a spatula too, as the butter will get caught in the back of it, but then we'll just keep going. And you'll want your butter at room temperature, softened a little bit, but we don't want it melted. That will ruin the integrity of the pastry dough, and it won't bake as you desire. So we're just going to work this in. This has a couple layers to it. They're very simple, but there are a couple steps to it. We're going to be, like I said, blending our flour and butter here until it's well incorporated. Let me set down my spatula. Making sure you have plenty of room. Getting that nice warm up today in the arms. Again, you can use a fork to do this as well. I can show you that technique. But you just want to keep working the flour and butter together until it comes into like crumbs. That means your butter's broken up into little pieces that are coated with the flour. And the flour is mostly incorporated in with the butter, so you're not seeing a lot of the powder laying around separately. It's more chunks and crumbs. So if you were doing this with a fork, let me grab a fork out. You would pretty much do the same technique. You would take your fork and you would just press your flour into the butter till it would form into crumbs. All right, so our pastry dough looks like it's well on its way to completion here. And what you're gonna do next is we are going to actually sprinkle about 2 tablespoons of water into our crumbs here to make more of a dough. And then this dough is going to be spread into a 13 by 9 inch cake pan. So let me set that down. Goodness, I've nowhere to set stuff this morning. All right, so we're going to mix that water in, pressing with our back of our fork again, And this is going to turn our crumbs more into a dough consistency. So we're just going to work it around. This, although simple, takes a little bit of effort and time and patience. So it's not something we just stir or mix up really quick. It takes a little bit of work. But again, it's simple recipe, simple ingredients that a lot of us already have in our kitchen. All right, so once you feel that it's getting well incorporated and starting to come together, you could actually take your hand and start pressing it and to make that dough into a nice ball. And then we're going to take it out of our bowl and put it into our baking dish. This is going to be the crust of our pastry. The pastry is going to be 3 layers. We're going to have our crust, our filling, and then I will explain the glaze that you'll be making that you'll put on after you bake. While you're preparing this, you can also take a moment to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. That is going to be the temperature you will need. It's going to bake for about an hour. This is a pastry, kind of like a pie crust is a pastry. So it does typically take longer in your oven than would a cake or cookies. All right, so I have the dough, and they say you can put it in an ungreased pan. There's a lot of butter in this dough, so we do not need to grease our pan. To just add more butter to the mixture, and it would actually ruin our crust. We want our crust to hold together. Now this is going to be a very thin crust. Remember, we're making a pastry. Pastries are a little bit thinner and flakier than a cake or any other kind of crust, than a pizza crust or a dough like that. This is a pastry dough. So it's going to be thinner and flakier and buttery delicious. So again, it's simple. It just takes a little bit of patience and working with the ingredients to get everything to where you need it to be for the next step. So just keep moving your dough around the bottom of your pan to evenly spread it out. You might feel like you don't have enough, but just keep working with it. Don't overspread one spot. You don't want any holes in the bottom of your crust. And I just typically work from the center out to the edges. It seems to be the best way to do it to evenly distribute your pastry crust. All right, so we have our crust in the bottom of our pan. Now we're going to be ready to work on our filling. So we're just going to move that aside a little bit. Switch bowls out. Now for the filling, I prepped it just a little bit because you needed to take a 1/2 cup of butter, which is 1 stick, and mix it with 1 cup of boiling water, which I did ahead of time just to save a step so you didn't have to sit here and watch my water boil. Okay, so now for the topping, what we're going to do, you bring your 1 cup of water to a boil, add your butter, and then we remove it from the heat, which we did, and we're going to add some almond extract. That's one of the main ingredients that we're going to be, flavor ingredients that we're using. Remember, this is an almond Kringle, so we want that delicious almond extract taste. And we're only going to be using 1 teaspoon. So we're going to add that at this time, our teaspoon of almond extract. Now remember, almond is a very powerful flavoring, so a little bit goes a long way. Although vanilla extract is similar, you can get away with adding more vanilla and not really affecting your recipe, but be careful. You want to measure your extracts carefully because they are really potent and strong flavors. All right, and then we're going to stir that in and add 1 cup of flour to this as well. Sorry, I'm reading my instructions. There's so many steps to this Kringle, again, that are simple, but I couldn't memorize them all before we came here together. So I'm looking over the instructions, which is important to do. So we're going to take that, and I'm going to take my fork, and I'm going to mix this together. Remember, my butter and water are still warm, so be careful. You don't want to splash it on yourself. And then we're going to be adding eggs. We're going to add 3 eggs to this mixture, 1 at a time, to make sure it's well incorporated. So we have water, butter, flour, almond, and now we're going to add our eggs. You really want to whisk or whip it or stir it vigorously to make sure you don't have any lumps left. The flour likes to clump up on you, so you want to make sure you don't have any flour clumps left in your filling, because that will not be very delicious to bite into. All right, so I have my 3 eggs and we're gonna mix it in. So again, just like the other portion, like the pastry crust, take your time. It's patience to get to the right consistency. It's not a simply wait till it looks like it's all mixed in. You wanna take your time and whisk it or whip it or stir it a little bit extra just to make sure everything's mixed in well and you've broken up all those clumps of flour so they don't bake right into your Kringle, and then somebody bites into it and then it just ruins the whole dish. All right, so I feel it looks really smooth. I don't see any lumps. This is the filling to our almond Kringle. So I'm gonna pour that right on top of our pastry crust that we already have in our dish. And then what this is gonna do, we'll just pour it right on. It's a nice batter, so it'll pour smoothly over top. And then I'm gonna get a spatula out to make sure we get all the goodness. We don't miss any that we worked so hard to make. And this is going to go in a 350-degree oven for 50 to 60 minutes. And again, remember, we're making a pastry here, so it's not gonna rise up really high. It's just gonna bake like more like a custard type filling. And there you go. We have our almond Kringle. The last step I'll go over with you, but I'll definitely share the recipe so you can see it as well. The last step takes place after you have baked it. What you're going to make is a delicious glaze for the top of it. So it's a pretty basic recipe. If you made icing or glaze before, you're just going to need, let me get the exact instructions for you. You're gonna need 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, 2 tablespoons of butter, a little bit of vanilla extract, water to thin it down a little bit, and then that's going to be drizzled over the top of your Kringle when it comes out of the oven. Lastly, you'll sprinkle some lovely almond slivers on top as garnish. And to finish off your dish, let me show you what they look like. They're sliced almonds. You can get them at the grocery store, and they'll be perfect topping for your almond Kringle. It's a great pastry and you can enjoy it with your coffee this morning. I appreciate you guys stopping by as we're cooking across America today, stopping in my hometown, our home state of Wisconsin, where we recreated the infamous almond Kringle. I hope you enjoy, and I'll share the recipe in the comments below, and catch me later today as we continue our travels in cooking across America. Have a good one, guys.